So welcome to this presentation on yoga and the climate crisis. I'm excited that you're here. I'm honored that Desiree invited me to present for this hour. I've studied yoga and meditation for a number of years and have come to the realization that there's something special and something unique about what we have in yoga and other Eastern disciplines, other spiritual practices that can offer something special to this conversation on the climate crisis. So I'm excited to share this with you. In fact, I'm passionate about sharing this with you today. So I'd like to start with centering, and we're going to do it standing. So if you would come up to standing. We'll be taking the arms out to the sides to make sure you have enough room. Look down at your feet and lift and spread your toes. And widen your feet so that you're making a connection with the earth. Close your eyes. Stand well. Stand in your full connectedness and integration as a spiritual being living in the world. We'll open ourselves up to blessings on our time together today by 3 ohms. Fold your hands together in front of your heart. Take a deep breath into your back body. Place your right hand over the center of your chest, your spiritual heart, and your left hand over your right hand. Take a deep breath. And extend your awareness down through your body, through your legs, through the soles of your feet, and into the earth. And using your breath, take a couple moments to connect with the earth. Appreciating her for her support, appreciating the sacredness of the earth. And see if she has anything to tell you. See if the earth has any message to give you that you can sense. Keeping your connection to the earth, release your hands down. Inhale, stretch all the way up, taking a deep breath of life, opening to spirit. Release your hands down. Inhale, take a deep breath of life, opening to the potential and possibilities of spirit. Exhale down. Inhale again, opening to spirit. Exhale. Inhale, open to this day. Exhale, release. Inhale, welcome the day. Welcome this minute, this moment of the day. Last one. Inhale, stretch all the way up, welcoming the day. Bring your hands together and welcome yourself to this day. And then bring your thumbs to the space between your eyebrows, bowing your head, remembering that we're part of something bigger. Keep your thumbs together as you take your palms apart and fold your hands over your heart to honor your courage, so that you live and offer your compassion with your arms out to your side. And then a closing mudra to bring your index finger and thumb together on your right hand and your other hand up. The combination of these two mudras symbolizes guided by wisdom and sustained by hope. Guided by wisdom, sustained by hope. Namaste. You can have a seat. So over the decades of my yoga practice, I've had many, many wonderful teachers. And Douglas Brooks is the person that stands out to me as my most significant teacher. So I would like to dedicate this presentation to him. Over the years, he has challenged me and asked me really uncomfortable questions, like why not talk about politics in yoga? And I'm going, no, we can't do that. So he sparked a lot in me with his questions, and also I realized the more I study all of this stuff is he was tuned in to the divine feminine archetype before I even knew the term. So as I'm going to be talking about that, I really honor Douglas has been there all the time. So to Douglas, I offer this. I would imagine all of us got introduced to the severity of the climate situation with Al Gore's documentary in 2006, An Inconvenient Truth. I got increasingly interested when I started traveling internationally. I had the opportunity to travel to Australia, to Ireland, to Canada, among others, and noticed that they were all abuzz about sustainability, about being green, and they were doing all kinds of things. They were putting their compost out on the curb. They had little on-off switches at the outlets to shut the juice off completely. They were totally into taking all their bags. I didn't see any plastic bags. They were just completely immersed and buzzed about sustainability. Then I would come back to the US and nothing was happening. There was no conversation, there was no media, there was no nothing. There was just this silence that I thought was bizarre. And I started asking myself, what is the reason for the silence? I would travel again internationally and everybody's talking about it. I would come back to the US and just nothing. It was like it didn't exist. And so for the last 6, 7 years, I have researched all the different topics related to the silence. And I have looked at our economy, I've looked at climate science, I've looked at the denier industry, the climate denier industry, I've looked at the economy, I've looked at our history, I've looked at the US foreign policy. I have read dozens and dozens of books and documentaries, articles, blogs, and so forth. I looked at all that research and discovered quite a few reasons, that most of which were depressing. One big positive, however, was the Dalai Lama's statement that the world will be saved by the Western woman. And he said this at the Vancouver Peace Conference in 2009. And that was pretty stunning. The world will be saved by the Western woman. And as I contemplated that, I came to the conclusion he did not mean just women. He did not mean one woman. He meant all people, men and women, who are connected and in touch with the divine feminine archetype. That archetype that is about our connection and our support with each other. Anadea Judith, in her book, Waking the Global Heart, has done a beautiful job of explaining that shift in consciousness. And she's talking about the shift in consciousness that's happening across the planet is from the static masculine archetype that tends to be hierarchical and also tends to be a little head-oriented to the feminine, the active feminine archetype that is fluid and flexible and supportive and heart-centered and about connection and about empowering each other, about supporting each other, about leading and living from the heart. And what's really interesting about that is you look at the internet, which is about moving across boundaries and being connected to each other without having to be face-to-face. And we connect on a horizontal kind of connection rather than hierarchical. We empower each other by our connections through the internet. So that was really helpful to realize that and start to think about that. I think the most impactful influence for me, though, was hearing a lecture by Joanna Macy and reading her book, Active Hope, How We Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy. And as I said earlier today, I think that's the issue all of us face. It's like how to make a difference without getting overwhelmed, you know, without feeling so depressed that we just become apathetic or ineffective. So I heard this lecture by her, and I thought she was just so incredible and inspiring and vibrant and enthusiastic. She has developed workshops on this topic, Active Hope, and she teaches around the world. She's written dozens of books. And I was curious about her age, because when I heard her on the online interview, I thought, she might be around my age. So I couldn't even wait for the book to arrive. I Googled her name to find out how old she was, and found out that she's 85. So here's somebody almost 20 years older than me who's making such a significant difference. She's put all of her years of Buddhist practice together with the information she has from having a Ph.D. in systems theory and working in that field, and put it all together to create these workshops and write books that are really making a difference. And the interesting thing that happened for me is, after connecting with that book and her teaching, is that I finally felt hopeful for the first time. I felt like inspired, and I said, yes, you know, this is possible. And I wanted to be part of the solution rather than feeling like overwhelmed and depressed. So I went to the Climate Reality Project in August of 2013 and got trained as a volunteer climate leader. And here I am today. So my conclusion from all of this is that we all have something to offer. And my hope today, by giving you this presentation, is to spark that interest for more people to want to participate. So I have some good news, and I have some bad news. And I think we'll start with the bad news first, which is the current state of the climate science, okay?
Our planet is vast. It's difficult to comprehend the scale. It's difficult, too, to comprehend the scale of humanity and the vast changes we've wrought in a lifetime. Population, production, and consumption have grown exponentially. Roads, railways, airlines, shipping routes, the digital revolution. We've created a globally interconnected society. Evidence is mounting, we've entered the Anthropocene. Humanity is altering Earth's life support system. Carbon dioxide emissions are accelerating. Greenhouse gas levels are unprecedented in human history. The climate system is changing rapidly. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change assesses the risks and options for societies. Its latest report states it is extremely likely humans are the dominant cause of warming in the past 60 years. Without deep emissions cuts, it is likely Earth will cross the target of 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the target set by international policy. This could happen as early as 2050. If emissions keep rising at current rates, a 4-degree rise by 2100 is as likely as not. It's very likely heat waves will occur more often and last longer. The Arctic will warm faster than the global average. It's likely sea ice will all but vanish in summer within decades if high emissions continue. It's very likely sea level rise will accelerate. Cities and coastal areas are vulnerable. In general, wet regions are set to get wetter, dry regions drier. Monsoons are likely to become longer, their footprint likely to grow, and downpours likely to intensify. The acidity of the ocean has increased 26% since the start of the Industrial Revolution. The full consequences of all these changes on the Earth system are unknown. Humanity's carbon footprint is huge. Societies will need to adapt to climate change. The scale of change depends on decisions made now. can we remain below 2 degrees? It is possible, but it is up to societies now to decide the future we want. For a likely chance of achieving the 2-degree target, societies can emit another 250 billion tonnes of carbon. We burn about 10 billion tonnes of carbon a year. At current rates, we will use this budget in about 25 years.
So the last scene in the video is saying we have 250 billion tons of carbon we can put in the atmosphere between now and the year 2100. And that is to keep the global rise in temperature to 2 degrees centigrade or less. To keep the global temperature 2 degrees centigrade or less. That's about 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And what that last scene was, that we're blowing through that budget of how much carbon we can put in the air about 60-some years too fast. So that's very scary. That's why so many climate people are upset about what's going on and about the silence. I think one of the activist statements that I read really sums it up very well. She said, "We are the first generation to feel the effects of climate change, and we're the last generation that can do anything about it." So that's pretty stunning. I think we all have heard Pope Francis start to speak out about climate change, and he's going to be giving a major edict on climate to all the Catholics, and of course that would apply to everybody. But he's starting to talk about a moral imperative to do something about what's going on. And I would imagine all of you know about Georg Feuerstein, who wrote all of those wonderful books that we use as references and you studied in teacher training and so on and so forth. He wrote a book called Green Yoga in 2007, which I only found out about as I started getting more interested in the climate. And he says this, that we live at a time of decisive crisis is ever so slowly dawning on those whose intelligence has not succumbed to slumber. Our crisis, to be sure, is not only of an environmental nature. It affects virtually all aspects of human existence, including our social, political, moral, and spiritual life. He went on to say, as we see it, the problems in the world today are forcing us to grow up, both intellectually, individually, and as a species. If we fail to achieve emotional, intellectual, moral, and spiritual maturity, we will inevitably contribute to the wreckage of our planet and possibly, even likely, the demise of the human species. Now, he wrote this in 2007. He's also went on to say, our planet is dying. What are you going to do about it? And that's written to all of us who are yoga teachers and yoga practitioners.
One day, we will wake up to find that the energy that powers the alarm clock came from the breeze through the trees the night before. And we will go to work that morning riding the rays of the sun. It will light our cities and power our businesses. It will warm our homes and cool our workplaces. It will reduce sources of conflict and fuel our economies. It will connect us all. It won't scar the land or poison the seas. The food we eat will be good for our bodies and good for the planet. And the weather that day won't make us worry for tomorrow. There will be more jobs and less disease. The sea level will stop rising. And species will stop dying. The question is, how do we get to that day from where we are today? All 7.3 billion of us. We start by deciding that beyond our doubts and differences, such a day truly exists. And that is something each of us can do today. We can make today the day we stop thinking that the changes required to get there are impossible and beyond us, and start realizing that they are not only possible, but what the future requires of us. We must stop turning from the warnings of science and fear and denial, and instead turn toward the solutions and partnerships we need. We can make today the day we stop pointing at each other in blame, and instead chart a new course together. We have never faced a crisis this big, but we have never had a better opportunity to solve it. We have everything we need to wake up to a different kind of world. We need our leaders to be brave and their choices to be bold. They will either remember us as the generation that destroyed its home, or the one that finally came to respect it. We have every reason in the world to act. We can't wait until tomorrow. This is our only home. You can choose today to make a world of difference.
So there's more good news. The latest research shows that by the year 2050, solar energy alone could supply 2 times the amount of total energy needed for the entire planet. 2 times the total energy needed by the planet. And if we use all 3 sources, the best 3 sources, which is wind, water, and solar, we can supply all of the world's energy needs by the year 2030. That's huge. That's huge. I mean, that creates the vision that Morgan Freeman was just describing on that video. There's also more good news. Burlington, Vermont just became the first city in the US to completely supply all of its energy with 100% sustainables. So it is possible. Germany's well on its way for that. Also, Norway is making huge changes. So it is happening around the world, and this is possible. When I look for the reasons of the silence, I come up with 2 major ones. First is misinformation, and the second is confusion from the misinformation leading to complacency or indifference. And misinformation is huge. We have in the US the biggest climate denier industry on the planet. So I've got in the handout some statistics about the climate denier industry and what they did. But just so you know, they hired the same PR company that the tobacco lobby used when they all stood up in front of Congress and said, we don't think there's anything wrong with smoking cigarettes. They used the same PR company, and the company has already said all they're trying to do is create doubt. If they create enough doubt, then people won't buy into it. And they've been successful because there's so much misinformation out there and people think it's the truth. One of their climate scientists, however, that they have been using to say, you know, it's a hoax, it's not true, has changed his mind. And he just recently, over the last couple months, looked at the research again and said, whoops, I was wrong. There is climate change, and it's happening, and we are warming the climate. Global warming is happening. So there's that going on, and there's a very interesting free video online done by Frontline, and it's called Climate of Doubt, and it explains this whole process by how they went about doing this. So it's good to know that that's happening. Then the confusion from all of that leads to a sense of complacency, because everybody looks around and going, there must not be a problem, because if there was a problem, somebody would be doing something. And it leads to a feeling of indifference. What I think is really interesting, that I've come to the conclusion, and climate scientists are saying, no one is going to save us. Not the president, not a Congress, because the interests of keeping going as it is are huge. The financial interests of Mobil Oil and the Koch brothers and all of those folks, it's just huge. So no one's going to save us. I love what Barbara Marx Hubbard has said. She's another heroine of mine, and she has said we need this process that we're going through. It's like a big, messy birth. We're birthing a new world into existence, and it's messy and it's painful, and we don't know what's coming because we're in the process of birthing it as we speak. It depends on what we all choose to do. And she says it is necessary, this is a necessary crisis we're going through in order to break the complacency, in order to crack enough hearts open that we care, that there's enough compassion and enough people caring about it to do something. So I would like to ask you two questions now. I would like you to answer what you think it is that yoga has to offer. So my perspective is that yoga and Eastern spirituality has something that's unique to offer to the climate conversation. What do you think it is? And again, we're not going to take any questions now or any answers now. I want you to just close your eyes and contemplate that for a minute. I'll take all the questions at the end. So just what do you think it is from your experience of being a yoga practitioner and meditation practitioner? If you've been doing that for a while, what is it that's special about yoga that it has to offer this situation? Then you can open your eyes, because I've got a second question, then I'll tell you my answers in just a minute. The second question is, what is the deepest core issue at the heart of our climate crisis? And let's go deeper than greed, because that's the first obvious thing to reach for. What's causing the greed? So what is the deepest reason that has brought us to this place that we're in this climate mess? So close your eyes and just contemplate that. Take a couple breaths. And then you can open your eyes. So yoga and the Eastern practices have many, many wonderful benefits. Some of them are the ability to be present, the ability to not close off, the ability to be with what is, the ability to face whatever is going on and to feel it. And that's just absolutely tremendous and transformative. And if we keep following that idea in a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, I think it's because yoga gives us a different perspective. Yoga gives us a different point of view. It's the non-dual philosophy that Douglas Brooks has so eloquently taught us when he says, you're not me. You're something like me. You're nothing but me. I'm not you. I'm something like you. I'm nothing but you. He's saying we're all made of the same spiritual essence. We're all made of the same stardust. We're just different manifestations of the same energy. Just like in this morning's asana class, every teacher basically said that same message. We're all just reflections of each other. When we take that teaching to heart, that's a paradigm changer. Most of the planet does not think that way. Most of the planet says, I'm here, you're over there, I'm trying to get my goodies, you do the best you can, you know, I'll throw you some scraps if I can. That's kind of the dominant worldview of every man for themselves, every man and woman for themselves, and not really particularly open and compassionate. It's a huge paradigm shift, what yoga has to offer, that we're all the different manifestations of the same spiritual energy. And that also is the same thing that current physics is saying, that there's one energy that pervades the phenomenal universe, the phenomenal world. It reminds me of Einstein's statement, problems cannot be solved at the same level of thinking that they were created. When the Industrial Revolution started, we did not know burning coal and oil and all that would create such havoc on our earth. We didn't know that. But now that we do, we need another paradigm in order to go forward and create the solutions. I think I can say with just about 100% certainty that everybody in this room has shifted your vibration in the last 5 years. You are not the same person. If you've been doing your spiritual practices, if you've been meditating or doing your yoga or even shavasana, your japa, all of those, if you've been doing those, your vibration, your frequency is different. You've expanded. And even this morning, I could tell, and I'm sure you all could too, in the 45-minute session we did on meditation, you shifted your vibration in that 45 minutes from those practices. We were different at the end of that. We were different at the end of our asana practice than in the beginning. And when you look at years and years and years of doing that, you stand in a different place than most of the world. You hold a different spaciousness. Your heart is wider. You have more compassion. This is what the world needs to hear. This is what the world needs to see. I think one of the big shifts is, over time, our spiritual practices lead us from thinking of ourselves as a human being to thinking of ourselves as an embodied soul, as an embodied spirit. And I would like to now just ask you some questions. What is your contribution that you want to make to the most significant event in history, in the history of our planet? What is the contribution you want to make? Now, most people don't start with that kind of a question. They start with the idea of, I'm overwhelmed. What can I do? I'm all by myself. I'm just one person. I can't possibly do it. And we go in that direction. Instead, my suggestion is flip it around and ask, what is the universe trying to bring through you? What is the evolutionary impulse bringing forth through you? You have unique gifts. You have greatness inside of you. What is trying to come forth through you that's unique, that's special, that nobody else has to offer, that's inside of you? You know that restlessness you feel sometimes, that angst you feel sometimes, that just like uncertainty? That's the universal consciousness trying to bring something through you. It's the evolutionary impulse that's coming through in this shift of consciousness to help us deal with this. And you have to find your inner heroine, your inner hero, and step into your greatness. And that's really scary. It's terrifying. And we can't do it all at once. We do it gradually. We do it little by little. We do it just stage by stage as we move forward. And you become the heroine of your own life, the hero of your own life, by standing fully in what you have to offer. I don't think it's an accident that we're all here. I don't think it's an accident that we're attracted to this. I don't think it's an accident that we're in this yoga event, that we're in this yoga practice together. Maybe we're coming together because we have something that the world needs to hear. And maybe as you step out and say something, you will spark others like Joanna Macy did me to say, yes, I can do something about this. I can be a role model. I can step out and be with what's true for me. And it's not that anybody has to do a certain kind of thing. You listen to what's inside of you and just honor that and let it come forth. It takes a lot of courage takes a lot of trust in the universe. So the biggest idea that I wanted to share with you today is that you have something unique to share, and you speak from a different worldview. And I just keep wanting to ask you, what is it that you're here for? And what if it's up to you? What if you go home and you tell a friend or a spouse, and they tell someone, and then they tell someone, and they tell someone at work, and they tell someone's sister, and then they tell us, What happens if in 14 iterations of that, because you said something to somebody tonight or tomorrow, whenever you get home, you said something to somebody, and that's the tipping point? Because at a certain point, when enough hearts are open, we can make a difference. But the big thing right now is getting the word out, changing the conversation, and getting it so big that we can have an effect. So I want you to always remember that you speak from a different perspective. You speak from a place of compassion and a more broad perspective than most of your colleagues in your regular life, unless you just hang out with yoga people. All right, so there are lots of things we can do, and I want to share a bunch of them with you, so if the people with the handouts would pass them out. So I'll just start, because the first ones are kind of easy. I divided this into 3 categories. What we can do individually to make a difference in the climate situation, what we can do collectively, and then we have to take good care of ourselves and optimize our energy. I will have this video on my website, and you can email me any questions that you have about anything, and I have 8 pages of resources on everything from spirituality to climate change to democracy on my website. You can go to betseydowning.com, B-E-T-S-E-Y Downing.com, and click on the resources list and find all of this stuff. And I will also post this handout on my website. All right, so raise your hand if you didn't get a handout. All right, number 1, what we can do individually. So the first thing I wrote is engage in the conversation about climate disruption. And I've got a whole bunch of resources so you'll be up to date on the science. But talk to your friends and family. Don't let climate denier myths go unchallenged. Remember, we got out of Vietnam because everybody took a stand. We tend to think, we're helpless, and individually we are, because we're just one little thread. But when we put hundreds of thousands and millions of threads together, we get a really big, strong rope. So the first thing we want to do is get the information out there. And I'm not talking about doing this necessarily in your yoga class. I'm not talking about making your yoga class into a climate thing. I'm talking about talking to all the people that you know. And also, I will say, I've seen quite a few yoga teachers who have put people in child pose and just commented about, we're all in this together. And just made those kinds of connections. Anything you make with this bigger perspective that we're all the same spiritual energy, just different manifestations of it. All right, so I highlighted the ones, I bolded the ones that I thought you might not be as familiar with. So I'm going to skip over everything else because it's obvious. All right, the C category is educate yourself about climate science. There's a whole bunch of reliable sources, so you know which ones are reliable and tested by science. Then at the bottom of the page, it says, get educated about the big issues facing our country, such as the loss of our democracy, income inequality, corporate biases of mainstream media, the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us about. All of those affect climate change. Check out non-mainstream media for another perspective. And I did put this information on here because I think it's pretty stunning. In 1983, 50 companies owned 90% of the media consumed by Americans. By 2012, just 6 companies owned and controlled 90% of the media. So the different options, all the options are less. And all of the media is controlled by the big corporations. So it's pretty stunning. There's some non-mainstream places you can go to. I'm so impressed with Amy Goodman at Democracy Now! She's been doing this work for decades, and she's very impressive. If you don't know about the Powell Doctrine, if you missed that in your history, I gave you a link to it because it's how the conservative business interests got together in 1971 based on the Powell Doctrine that he wrote before he was appointed to the Supreme Court at that time for the corporations to take over the public sector. So it's good to know about that. All right, what we can do collectively, everything we can do to support the return of our democracy. Nothing will work as long as the richest 1% control over 48% of the global wealth and makes the choices for all of us. And I don't know if you saw the latest research that's expected to be 50% in a couple years. 1% of the people on this planet are going to own 50% of the global wealth. And as you've noticed, Congress doesn't work. It doesn't work because of the money in Congress, that they are lobbying and that kind of thing. So until we get our democracy back, we're not really going to have a good shot at this. So everything you can do on that. And it does mean getting a little bit aware of politics and getting involved on some level. All right, this is a stunning fact. ExxonMobil spent $16 million over a 7-year period to discredit climate science. And the interesting thing is they didn't do it by ExxonMobil coming out and say that. They did it through 43 front organizations, like the Heritage Foundation, like the Cato Institute, and all that. And you can find all of that stuff online. It's totally available everywhere. And the Koch brothers have now outstripped ExxonMobil. They spent $67 million since 1997 to discredit the climate science. And of course, they are big owners of oil refineries and oil industry and concrete and all of that. So, and the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, has let unlimited money come into our Congress and influence political ads and candidates and so forth. So, all right, B under that section of what we can do collectively is changing laws is more impactful than changing light bulbs. So support a tax on carbon. So polluters have to pay the full price. Right now they can leave, and they leave the environment in a mess. The communities around it, the kids are using inhalers in 2nd grade because the air is so polluted. So support the carbon tax. Support alternative energy sources, because solar and wind for a little while are going to need a little bit of support financial. They're going to need some government help with that until they're up and running. And already it's showing that they are going to be cheaper than fossil fuels. So that's very exciting. So the last one to talk about is optimize your energy and health. And most of those things you know about, most of those things you do. I know I'm preaching to the choir. However, I wanted to make a big push for meditation. If you don't have a meditation practice considering starting, make sure you're really committing to it. It's transformative. It teaches you how your mind operates. It teaches you to step back and witness what your mind is doing so you can see when you get triggered and you can make some other choices. And you can also identify slowly over time with a part of yourself that is deeper than your mind. So this last statement here, meditation gradually transforms you from knowing yourself as a physical being to knowing yourself as an embodied soul. I have one other comment to make. I want to close with a poem, and then we can do some questions and answers. The other comment I want to make is your heart is going to break in this process, and you just have to be willing to go through it. You have to be willing to sit with your feelings, to sit with your overwhelmment, to sit with your terror at what is possible in this world if we don't do something. You need to sit with that. And you need to sit with what's happening to the islanders on the Maldives, where they're an island country in the Indian Ocean, and they've already had sea level rising. You need to sit with that, what they're doing. what the Philippines is having experienced. These people around the world who didn't contribute to climate change, who don't have the lifestyle that we do, who are getting the most effects from it. And it's primarily right now people of color and poor communities. And we need to look at, we need to own, we have white privilege. And that's a term I only heard a couple years ago, that all of us in this room have won the lottery of birth. We've all won the lottery of birth. We can afford to be here. We didn't get born in a poor country. We didn't get born in Bangladesh, where the only option for us was to go into a garment factory and make clothes for the US and have the building fall down on them and kill 1,100 people. We didn't get that lottery ticket. And I come back to the world will be saved by the Western woman. But your heart is going to break in that process as you open to what we have done, white people, to indigenous people and people of color in this country and around the world. And we need to break out of our complacency and our indifference, and we need to care, in my humble opinion. It's just huge. And the fact that the FBI director said last week in front of everybody at a press conference, yes, racism exists, and some of the things we did to people of color was brutal. That's the divine feminine archetype coming through and being honest. What a breath of fresh air that he was willing to say that. And the first time I've ever heard a middle-aged white guy own up to something like that. That's just fantastic. We need to support that. We need to carry that on. But I did want to make that mistake. My experience is once you do that and you sit with it, your heart does not break apart. It breaks open. It breaks open to more compassion, and over time, you can hold the suffering and you can hold the joy and the celebration, because we need to do both. You know, we don't want to just get depressed and focus on the suffering. We need to dance, we need to play, we need to sing, we need to do all those things and celebrate what is beautiful and wonderful. But we also need to care. Okay. I want to close with a poem by Drew Dellinger. He's a phenomenal activist, and he's very much into the art of poetry and words and how that can make a contribution. So sit well and close your eyes. Open your heart to these words. It's 3:23 in the morning and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the season started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, and birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protest when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew? So that's an excerpt from Hieroglyphic Stairway, a poem by Drew Dellinger. You can go onto his website and hear it. You can order his book, which is a beautiful book. I have it here, and I've already given it to Sandy. She was talking to me first. So those last 7 words, what did you do once you knew, are a sense of urgency about what we can do and what we want to do to leave Earth thriving for our grandchildren, our children, our grandnieces, everybody who comes after us. The good news is we're not alone. We have the courage to be the hero and the heroine of our lives. We can open our hearts wider, even wider, with compassion toward everyone. We can make a world of difference. This is our time. This is why we're here. This is what we have to offer. Namaste. Thank you. Okay, have a seat. Thank you. So one of the things I really love to do is I love to give things away. So I already gave that book to Sandy because it's got that gorgeous poem in it. Lester Brown is a treasure. He just turned 80 and is retiring. He has been in this fight since the beginning. He's been doing this research for 40 years. He was telling people 40, 50 years ago, we need to pay attention. His book is so clear, World on the Edge. Anybody want it? I have two. All right, now here's the other thing that's really, really fun. Use reusable bags. Go anywhere and get these reusable bags. Somebody gave me two 10 years ago, before I ever kind of knew about it. It was like an EcoSap or something, and I still have them and I still use them, and they fold up even smaller than this. And then you unfold them and then you got this bag. So it's like really the coolest thing. So you just unfold it up in your pocketbook or your car or whatever, then you got this, you know, when you go in, and it's kind of a conversation piece and it's fun. Okay, who wants this? Okay, here's another one.